So welcome to the Ableism in the South Asian Community event. I hope everyone's having a good weekend. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited for you to get to hear the stories of our wonderful panelists and learn more from our peer advocates about the history of ableism in our community. With that, I will turn it over to Tasneem Khan, who is a student on the ASUC Disabled Students Commission, who has prepared a wonderful presentation about the history of the disability rights movement and how it relates to South Asians.
Can I have permission to screen share, please?
Oh, yes. Okay. I think you should be able to screen share now.
Cool. All right. And everyone can hear me okay and see the slides okay? All right, awesome. So as Maha introduced me, my name is Tasneem. I'm a member of the ASUC Disabled Students Commission. I want to thank Maha and Hari for helping me make this presentation. And I think we're just going to go over some concepts that come up when we're talking about ableism and we're talking about disability. Right, so to start us off, talking about ableism, this is a quote from T.L. Lewis, who is a community lawyer and activist who focuses on issues related to marginalized identities, things like race, class, disability, and other marginalized identities. And the quote's kind of long, but I think if we were to boil it down, we could say that ableism is when society rates your value based on norms. And these norms are often related to productivity and to what is considered functioning in this society. And if you don't meet these norms, then you can be excluded from society, and this can lead to systemic oppression. And when I say excluded, it can mean just like social situations, but I think there's also larger implications with like hiring, our political process, things like that. So what's interesting is that the norms are societally constructed. We make them, and that means we have the power to change them. And they do change a lot. But they are also very much tied to other systemic issues, things like anti-Blackness, things like colonialism, that also really affect the South Asian community. Yeah. Cool. So to understand kind of where ableism comes from, we can look at different models of disability. So the first one that really is kind of ableist is the medical model of disability. And in this view, disability is viewed primarily as a medical condition, and you need to cure it. You need to fix yourself, I guess, before you're allowed to rejoin or be included in society. And that's kind of messed up. It leads to exclusion, it leads to denial of civil liberties. That means that doctors and medical professionals have a lot of power when deciding who can rejoin society. The burden of responsibility is put on the disabled person. And of course, this is like kind of messed up, right? So this led disability rights activists to look for a different model of disability that we'll talk about next. But I want to make sure to be clear that when talking about the medical model of disability, it's not saying that medical care is bad. Rather, it's that medical care is seen as like a barrier to being part of society, and it is on the disabled person to fix themselves, quote unquote, to be part of society. So to contrast that, there's the social model of disability. And this basically says that society is what disables people. People can have whatever impairments, but if society is inclusive, then these impairments are not disabling. Being disabled is just another difference, that like a normal difference, I guess. So this is really useful to think about when we're talking about combating ableism, because it allows us to think about how we can make society more inclusive and how we can make it less ableist. We can design programming and policies. We can increase accessibility in many different ways, providing technology, support people, other aspects of society that affect disabled people, and even also like medical care. I think that making medical care more accessible rather than being a barrier to society, it provides disabled people agency in order to manage their own disabilities in their own ways. And that puts society as the one who is responsible. And the most important thing for this is if we can identify where the stigmas and attitudes are that lead to ableism, then we can accurately address them. So there's a saying in the autistic community, if you've met one person with autism, then you've met one person with autism. I kind of adapted that for this event today. If you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. And all that means is that disabled people each have unique identities, and they have unique, varied relationships with their disabilities. And so part of these identities is intersections. So I just named a few here. There are many more. I think one important one in the South Asian community is gender. I think it's a very gendered culture. For women, there can be pressure to get married, pressure to take care of your family, take care of your parents. If you're even more traditional, like stay at home and cook. And for men, there can be pressure to, become an engineer, provide for your family. And so these expectations, they affect how a disabled person experiences their disability as well. Another intersection is sexual orientation. So one example of this is autistic people are statistically more likely to identify as LGBTQ+. Socioeconomic status is a really big one, I think, because it can affect your ability to get a diagnosis, your ability to have access to treatment. And I think there's also a lot of different attitudes around this as well. And of course, religion is also a big part of culture. So of course, all of these intersections and more, they help create the norms and influence what norms can lead to ableism. So yes, we got good news today. Congratulations to VP-elect Kamala Harris. But as Hari was saying today, it's not enough to simply vote in this person and it's wonderful news. It's not, but it's important to keep in mind that there's no disability justice unless you account for the needs of the most marginalized members. And so going through these next 4 years is important to center the most the most marginalized members and keep our government officials accountable. And with that, I'll hand it back to Maha to introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tasneem, for that fantastic and informative presentation. I highly encourage you all to check out the ASUC Disabled Students Commission. So to segue into our next portion of this event, which will be a panel, I'm going to introduce the panelists. So we have Hari Srinivasan, who is a minimally speaking autistic, majoring in psychology and minoring in disability studies. Recently featured on former President Barack Obama's Instagram for his activism in the disability justice space. Hari also writes for the Daily Cow and is the first non-speaking autistic president of Spectrum, Autism at Cal. We have Sukhjin Kaur, is the founder of Chronically Brown, an online platform which aims to spread awareness of chronic illness and disability in the South Asian community. Her goal is to break down the stigma surrounding chronic illness and disability in order to improve accessibility for disabled South Asians and encourage them to own their illness without feeling shame. And we also have Tina Aswani Omprakash. She is a Crohn's patient, a Master's of Public Health candidate at Mount Sinai's Econ School of Medicine, and award-winning patient expert and health advocate based out of New York City. She has had Crohn's disease for 15 years and has had numerous surgeries. Tina maintains a blog and advocacy platform called Own Your Crohn's with an overarching aim to normalize the rhetoric around chronic illnesses and disabilities in order to help diverse groups of patients own their ailments to live fuller, happier lives. Via her writing, lobbying, social media advocacy, and speaking engagements, she spearheads public health causes initiatives supporting health equity for women, racial and ethnic minorities, and sexual minorities. So we will begin the panel now. And my first question is to Hari. What has your experience been like as an autistic individual in the South Asian community? What are the typical South Asian attitudes towards autism and disability that you've seen? Please feel free to share any specific stories.
I will start with why Halloween is my least favorite holiday. For me, it is a stark reminder of exclusion. Kids in your neighborhood, even kids living on your street, who would not give you the time of the day or even acknowledge your existence the rest of the year, are suddenly at your doorstep, arms stretched out for candy. So I am needed only when they need something, candy in this case. This is what ableism looks like. Mine is a very visible disability, and there is such a huge stigma attached to anything that looks different in the South Asian community. I grew up in Cupertino in South Bay, which is this high-scoring and competitive district dominated by Indian and Chinese families. Mine is a very visible disability, and there is such a huge stigma attached to anything that looks different in the South Asian community. I grew up in Cupertino in South Bay, which is this high-scoring and competitive district dominated by Indian and Chinese families. A common trait is a relentless pursuit of the Ivy League ambition for their kids. This goal is so dominating and pervasive that nothing should stand in the way. After all, they have paid a ton of money to be in this school district. What this translates to is that you are excluded lest you distract their kids from their Ivy League goals. Maybe autism is catching too. But all that changes when the kids reach late middle school and high school, when there is a focus on unique extracurricular activities that make for a fantastic college application essay. Suddenly we are sought after to fill the volunteer hours. A high school volunteer has even told me what a great advantage it would be for him on his college application to talk about volunteering with me and how he was not telling anyone else about it, so it remains a competitive advantage for him. So apparently we are good for candy and fodder for that unique college essay. This is what ableism looks like. I'm not saying everyone is in this with nefarious intentions. There are some really amazing individuals who truly want to help. But most people seem to think that playing a board game or some such activity or a class with you once a week or once a month does the job. Yes, there is interaction, there is even inclusion, but there is no belonging. It's like you are a dusty piece of clothing that is brought out at periodic intervals to be aired and then put right back into the closet. Many times these interactions feel like more therapy sessions. What we need extends beyond being the recipient of periodic volunteering. There was nothing I wanted more than to just simply hang out with other kids at the mall doing seemingly nothing, the way I would see typical teens doing. Inclusion means being allowed to exist in the same space. We need to not just be included, we need to feel we belong. Belonging is a sense of community, where you are seen as having worth to that group. Belonging has to include moments outside of the volunteering activities. Disabled kids and their families face terrible isolation. Often their circle are other families with disabled children. And often the typical kids who are volunteering are personally impacted, such as a sibling or a relative or a close friend. No one else cares enough. My experiences in childhood have made me somewhat cynical. Of course, I must stress there are some amazing exceptions to this generality. Now let me come to Cal. Remember, the kids growing up surrounded by the attitudes of their parents are the ones coming to Cal. I know bunches of kids from Cupertino schools joined Cal the same time I did, yet I could not count a single one as a friend. So what happens when I try to go for an English meeting, or even an SIS meeting, both of which I attempted just once? There were bunches of students talking to each other in small groups, casting furtive and uneasy glances at my lone self on the other side of the room. They don't know what to do with me or even how to interact because they have been taught to not acknowledge me for most of their lives. I may be a brownie, but I was still in the other group. It causes them a lot of cognitive dissonance. A person like me is not supposed to be in college and in the same environment as them. It does not matter if I... Now let me come to Cal. Remember the kids growing up surrounded by the apps if they ignored me. By your fellow brownies is a deeper and very hurtful cut. The irony is that I've heard the opposite from the Black community. A fellow autistic student here was given so much support, mentoring and a sense of community by the Black Association at Cal, even more support than what disabled student groups were able to provide him. Black alum even helped him find his first job after graduation. Somehow I can't imagine our Indian Student Association here doing the same for me if I don't even allow a sense of community or belonging in the first place.
Thank you so much, Hari, for sharing your story. I'm very grateful that you are here and part of our event today. I'm going to ask the question to Tina now. Can you describe what your disability is and share with us some of your initial experiences with ableism in the South Asian community when first diagnosed? How has the community knowingly or unknowingly perpetuated common misconceptions about disability?
So sorry, I have one little bit left.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now moving on to community events and festivals at parks and temples, etc. There are a few things here. One is people will stare at you as though you are an alien from Mars. Another is assuming that everyone can sit crisscross on the floor and chairs are for seniors only. I physically have a hard time sitting in the crisscross position and a chair is easier. Then everyone is giving you a disapproving look as though you have stolen a chair meant for seniors. The third is introductions. When special needs groups perform in our community events, we are introduced in a very condescending and paternalistic way, almost highlighting the piety of the organizers that they thought fit to include these charity cases. The atmosphere is dripping with unspoken, or sometimes even spoken words of pity of how unfortunate our lives are, how our families are suffering, and how inspiring we are to others. Oh, poor you. I don't know how you do it. You were so brave. The problem is that pity is actually very self-serving. The person expressing pity walks away feeling very motivated and inspired with the unspoken and almost palpable, "Thank God, it's not near my kid. I'm so fortunate." The target of the pity, on the other hand, ends up feeling demoralized about their life. I would rather have a little bit of support and inclusion than a truck full of pity. Even as the audience is told how fortunate they are to be in the presence of great souls like us, right after the event, we are tucked right back into the closet and kept out of sight till we are ready to be showcased for the next event. There is currently a huge focus on community service, or seva as we like to call it, which is very positive. Even our scriptures talk of the importance of seva. However, what this is translated to is that people will happily make endless numbers of sandwiches for the homeless shelter, which is a very sterile activity, yet ignore the immediate and profound impact that a few moments of human interaction will provide for the autistic kid living on their street.
Such great insights. Thank you. So sorry about cutting you off earlier. I'm going to ask the question to Tina again. Paraphrasing, can you describe what your disability is and some of your initial experiences with ableism in the South Asian community?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for having me here today. And I wanted to thank Hari for sharing his story. I mean, while I can't imagine what it's like to be autistic, I have experienced some of these things at community events and in school, at work, and it's heartbreaking. And my heart really does go out to you. And this really does need to change. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation today and hearing aspects of your story. They're so important. With regards to my condition and disability, I've had Crohn's disease, like you mentioned, Maha, early on for the last 15 years. I have a number of other diagnoses that have come with the Crohn's. Crohn's is really an inflammatory bowel disease similar to ulcerative colitis, and it attacks anywhere from the mouth to the anus. So it can cause all sorts of inflammation, bleeding, ulcerations, even breakthrough outside of your intestine to cause all sorts of infections. I've had over 20 surgeries. I've lived with multiple fistulas, which were tracts created into other organs. Nearly died a few times in between surgeries. And I live with an ostomy bag, which for those of you who may not be aware, an ostomy bag is basically a bag that attaches to a small portion of your intestine that they pull out. So I don't go to the bathroom through my bottom. I go through this ostomy. And it saved my life. I was so miserable in so much pain and bleeding so much that this was like this life-saving force for me to be able to go into a bag. But as you can imagine, in our South Asian community, this is hugely stigmatized. It's almost like you're dirty, you're sinful, you're disgusting and smelly if you have this. And also to have a bowel disease in our culture is, it's like, it's just no one wants to talk about it as it is in everyday life. But it's one of those things that's an everyday occurrence for everybody, right? So to not have functioning bowels is a really big struggle. And to be hit with an illness like this, most people get this illness during their pediatric years or sort of their young adult years. I was diagnosed at 22, but I had symptoms for many years earlier. Couldn't get insurance and couldn't get a diagnosis or treated for many years earlier because I didn't have health insurance. That's a whole other topic, but Ma, to answer your question, I think you wanted to know how the whole South Asian cultural aspect relates to my disease. There's so many ways I could go on and on about that, but just sort of breaking it down similarly to Hari, when it came to like family functions or community events, there was a time when I was 85 pounds. I was 24 years old at the time, and I had like tubes feeding me in my arm because I couldn't eat. I was vomiting everything and bleeding everything out. It was really awful. And you know, my mom wanted to take me to events and get my mind off of this. And like, I was like, Mom, I look so frail. And she's like, let's just get out of the house. You can just, we'll bring your food. You don't have to, you already feel like an outcast because you can't eat the food. Indian food is so spicy. And to have a bowel disease and try to eat Indian food, it's like complete antithesis. So that was a big problem. And then on top of that, people would stare at me. They're like, why are there tubes coming out of her arm? Like, why does she look like she's frail and dying? Does she have an eating disorder? Like, it's just, I was 50 pounds lighter, to just give you a sense of that. And it just, I had a Wall Street career just 6 months prior to that. And now I was in this position where I felt like everybody was looking at me, everybody was talking about me. And my mom was hearing all these stories from people. Oh, you know, your daughter must have eaten shit in college. Oh, you know, she must have drank so much and done this to herself. And there was no, it's not like I'm looking for pity from people, but I'm also not looking for this blame game or this guilt tripping either. And that was really difficult. As it is, I'm so sick. I've lost everything that was important to me in my life. And here it is, people are blaming me for my illness. That to me feels like ableism, in the sense that they are preferring able-bodied people, but not just preferring them, chiding me for having this illness, that this is a diet condition, that this is no more than me doing this to myself. Mind you, my father and my aunt and their aunt all died from this condition. This runs heavily in my family and causes colorectal cancer. And my father died at 39 years old when I was 8 years old. So just to give you a sense, this is the kind of toll emotionally that the ableism took on me in my early years of diagnosis.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Tina. So I'm going to ask Sukhjin the same question about, can you share a little bit about your disability and your initial experiences with ableism in the South Asian community?
Yeah, so I have rheumatoid arthritis. I've had it for 2 years, which is an autoimmune disorder. And the main symptom is that it affects my joints. However, that's not the only symptom, which is a big misconception that my family had. So, well, the symptoms vary person to person, just like with any condition, really. But it affects also my eyes, my throat, the temperature of my body. I sweat quite a lot because of my joints being so hot. I have to take immunosuppressants, which isn't fun in a pandemic. Um, yeah, so I started talking publicly about my arthritis because my family didn't seem to understand how it changed my life and how it affected me and why I needed certain things like a mobility aid and why I needed Western medication, not herbal medication, because they seem to push vitamins and supplements on me so much, which is the most annoying thing ever. Yeah, and the other experience, the main experience that really shocked me was I had a South Asian doctor who was helping me with my condition, and she decided to decide what medication I was having based on the fact that I should be able to have children soon. And this isn't something I'd never ever mentioned to my doctor that I wanted to have kids at soon or even ever. So it was shocking to me that she'd even chose a medication because of this. That was one of the most shocking things because you would think South Asian doctor, oh, I can put my trust into you, but I couldn't. I couldn't put my trust into her because she was choosing my future for me through my medication. Um, yeah, there was lots of other things like I had to hide symptoms from my family. My family minimized my experience with my pain because I was so young. So if I'm young with arthritis, that means it doesn't affect me that much as it would for an older person. Um, and that I couldn't care for myself. I couldn't rest when I needed to. I couldn't pace the things that I wanted to do as well. I couldn't pace the jobs that even like my parents gave me. I just had to be able to do them because I think the main thing is that if it's an invisible disability, they refuse to believe that it's real, even with a diagnosis, even with all the medications that you take, even with the actual physical symptoms of you being in pain. They refuse to believe that it's visible at all. Yeah, and like pulling on as well, like some of the misconceptions that the South Asian community believe about specifically chronic illness is that there is a cure for all these illnesses. And for some weird reason, they seem to think herbal remedies cure them too. That pain is not a big deal, that we're overreacting, we're asking for attention, um, and that we can't achieve things either. We can't achieve things, we can't, in our career, get married, have kids, anything like that. We can't seem to do that apparently in their eyes. Um, yeah, those are the main things that I experienced, especially when I was first diagnosed.
Thank you so much for sharing. The part about the doctor was definitely crazy. I mean, even with all the
Yeah,
education, the ableism is so ingrained. And it's quite a conundrum, really, that whether it's visible or invisible, the stigma doesn't seem to escape anybody. Um, Going off that, Tina, I know you are married. Something we commonly hear in South Asian culture is, if you have a disability, like don't disclose that because it'll prevent you from finding a partner. What were some of the issues that you faced on that front?
Oh, I don't even know where to begin on that. But like Sukhjeen, my medications were decided for me. There was this one doctor in Cleveland who was Asian, and he's like, "Oh, you don't want to take methotrexate because you just got married, and we want to leave the lines open for you to get pregnant." What makes you think with all of this I'm trying to get pregnant right now or think about it if this is the option that I need to get my bowels to calm down. Can this be a little bit more of a shared decision? You know, why not have that conversation? And so that felt really ableist to me. But, you know, with regards to your question around marriage, I remember, so I had met my husband, who was then my boyfriend. We were dating at the time, right after my diagnosis, like within a few months. And, you know, we were really young in our early 20s, and we really hit it off from the very beginning. And I remember like 6 weeks into us dating, I was like, you know what, I really need to tell him before things get more serious that I have this condition. And I did. I told him pretty openly, and I was like, you know, I'm really starting to like you. And I don't want to keep this information from you, as I think it's really important for a relationship to be built on trust. So I told him that I was originally diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. So I had told him that, and I told him about the history in my family of Crohn's disease. And he's like, you know what? I, I'm going to research it, but this doesn't change my mind. I was like, are you sure? I know this is a big issue in our culture, you know? And he's like, no, it's really hard to meet somebody who you really connect with. And I still remember this to this day. And we've been together for 14 years now. And it's just like, it's so heartwarming for me to have heard that in that moment, because I never thought, having even a mild illness, I would get married or consider having a partner who was able-bodied and actually wanted to be with me. Lo and behold, you know, the first time I met his parents, they were fine with it. They were like, oh, she seems really sweet, get married to her soon, right away, whatever, whatever. 2 years later, I'm having surgery, being rushed into the ER to have my colon removed and to have an ostomy bag placed. And the next thing I know is he's being called to his parents' home. Anand is his name. Anand, you need to reconsider being with her. He's like, well, I've been with her for 2 years. And they're like, so what? You're not married. And he told me this after my surgery. And I was torn. I was heartbroken, because I thought these people had accepted me. And they're in the medical profession, they're doctors, you know, not to put my in-laws or anybody down, but this is really a cultural problem. They turned around and they were like, we can find you anyone from India or here. You're handsome, you have a brilliant education, blah, blah, blah. Everything Hari was talking about, you know, top everything. Mind you, I had all of that prior to this diagnosis. And all of a sudden, I'm not wanted because of this illness. It hit me so hard that like it robbed me of all my confidence during that time. I remember, like, I was just like, this is so unjust, this is so unfair. Just because I have an illness, I don't qualify for marriage, or I don't qualify to be with somebody who I actually really love. And, you know, like, we talked about it, and he was like, you know what, Tina, I'm not walking out. If this is what they want, that's their, you know, that's their mentality, but I'm not walking out. He did marry me 2 years later. It was a fight, it was a struggle. Um, you know, we had to make amends, in the sense that we had to sort of give in to whatever they wanted for our marriage, just to make this sort of work. But I did not feel like I should have to make my wedding day about them or about their culture and all of that. And that was really painful for me. I remember even on my wedding day, they're like, oh, you can't eat anything. And I'm like, I have a J pouch now, which is an internal reservoir created out of your small intestine. And my ostomy had been reversed at that point. And I was like, I have to eat. I remember one auntie pulling a paratha out of my hand during breakfast time. They're like, no, we're rushing you into a puja. I did not eat until 5 p.m. that day. And I flared up so badly that my friend, one of my friends from New York City, came rushing with my suppositories to use during my wedding so that I would not have accidents in my sari. That's what ableism felt like to me, that no one cared that I was sick and that I had to put on a pretty doll face during my wedding just to make everyone else happy. And I remember my husband saying to his family, she's sick, please don't demand anything more of her during this wedding. And it was just met with, that's not our problem, that's the looks, you know, I got. And it was so hurtful and so demeaning on so many levels. And even since then, we've been married 10 years. And I'm going to say to you, even today, we face these issues. I have never fully been accepted because of my condition, because I'm considered this quote unquote burden on my husband. And I think that's what's really led me to some of my advocacy work, which we'll get into a little bit later on, I believe.
Thank you so much. That was really hard to hear, but powerful to hear. So the title of our event is, you know, a moniker on this very popular phrase in South Asian culture. I don't speak Hindi, so I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but LogKyaKahenge, which is this kind of mentality that, oh no, like what will other people think, you know, hide all the, you know, the parts of yourself that make you different from other people, because we all need to like blend into this ideal that the South Asian community upholds. So my question to the panelists, all of them, is personally, how have you gotten over this LogKyaKahenge mentality, this what will they think mentality, and embraced your disability identity? I'm going to ask Tina to answer this first.
So for me, LogKyaKahenge has so many like deep roots and so much pain, right? Because from very early on, I was asked to keep my disease a secret. My father kept his disease a secret until he was dying. And I think for me, it was really about, I didn't want to live like this anymore. And it took me a really long time. I started my advocacy work and it was like 2.5, 3 years ago now. And I couldn't live in silence and in shame anymore. And I was just like, if I'm suffering like this, who else is suffering out there? And so that's what really prompted me to start volunteering in different spaces and really starting to speak up. I am not going to lie. It felt like, and it was absolutely social suicide for me to come out with my story. And it was very difficult. I've lost a lot of friends, a lot of Indian friends along the way, but I've gained a whole community. And I think that's what's important for me to look at. And so as far as overcoming LogKyaKahenge, what will people say? What will people think? I'll keep quiet because people are going to talk. That mentality, I don't know if you ever overcome it per se as something that's culturally ingrained within you, but it's one of those things where you decide, you make an active choice that I'm not going to live this way anymore. And if I don't want to live like this, that's my choice. I can't just live under this oppressed societal sort of pattern just because that's what society is telling me to do. So it's an active choice for me to advocate every day. I have lost a lot of following from families, from family, and a lot of people from my family and beyond, in terms of family, friends, don't really speak to me anymore. And that's an active choice that I made because I'm being true to myself.
Sukhjeen, do you want to answer this question next?
Of course, yeah. I think the first time I've ever been aware of this mentality was when I was a kid, and my mom made me very aware. My immediate family were very open about mental illness because my mom had her own experience with her parents where they were struggling a lot with mental health, which unfortunately ended in a death. So my mom was always telling me about this mentality and that we're not like this, we're going to be open with everything. It was a really great environment, and I was privileged as a South Asian to have that environment. So I always knew about this mentality even before I was diagnosed. But when I was diagnosed, it became more prominent for me personally, and I don't think I'm over it. I don't think you can overcome it. I still feel like I have to hide symptoms. I still feel like I can't be open about what medications I'm taking. It's a struggle, and I just want anyone to know that you're not alone in the struggle, for sure. I think most people in this chat probably understand where I'm coming from and know what it feels like. Yeah, I don't think I've overcome it. I don't know if there is a way to.
Hari, do you want to share on this question?
My non-disabled peers can laughingly claim the title of ABCD or American-born confused daisy. The D in my case is replaced with the word disability, as the South Asian community does not really have a place for me. It is like one foot inside a door due to the color of my skin, but never fully allowed into the room. Given my disability is very significant and pretty visible, there was no question of not having a disability identity. I think coming to college has just helped me understand the identity in terms of a social justice viewpoint. I'm just going to use the acronym LKK as my text-to-speech app simply messes the pronunciation of the Indian word. While it's very easy for non-disabled families to joke about LKK, disabled individuals and families and disabled individuals struggle with it, as it can mean exposure to humiliation and ridicule from a very insensitive community. It's like a friend's mom being asked on the plane why she bothers to bring her son on vacation. Do autistic kids not deserve vacations too? At the other extreme is all the pity fest, which is very demoralizing. There is also what Professor Shah calls courtesy stigma, where family members are stigmatized due to their association with a disabled person. I think back to what the abolitionist Frederick Douglass had experienced. Douglass had realized that knowledge was the key to his freedom and kept focusing on the need for education. I am thankful that my family did not go the LKK when it came to my education. We found alternative routes, else I would not be at UC Berkeley today.
So something that our panelists have in common is that they do a lot of advocacy, particularly through social media platforms. So my question to all the panelists, how has social media helped you fight the stigma in the South Asian community and beyond? What parts of social media have been the most beneficial, impactful? Hari, I'm gonna pass it over to you again. Sukhjin, do you want to?
Yeah, that's fine. I think there's pros and cons to it both. Cons being that algorithms really do ruin the reach that you get for social media, the fact that people can't find you or even know who you are until you do things like this, and have opportunities like this. However, there's so many pros to the fact that you can actually meet people across the world who are exactly like you, which is so validating to know that you're not alone, because a lot of people say that to you, that you're not alone, but you don't really know it until it's there in front of you, and I'm literally seeing you all here today, and it's amazing that we've been able to do this through social media and Zoom. Zoom's amazing too. So yeah, I think it's been impactful in that way, but there is cons to the fact that you can't reach everyone out there, you can't help everyone out there, or as much as you would like to, and you can't reach the people that are actually affecting you the most. You can only reach the people that are actually interested in looking at your work and looking at your posts. Yeah.
Tina, do you want to talk about your social media advocacy?
Absolutely. I just wanted to, thank Sukhjin as well, because we actually met online doing similar kinds of work. So I'm very thankful to see more advocates come forward and share the South Asian experience with chronic illness. As far as my own advocacy work goes, like I was saying earlier, it sort of started with volunteering. And I think I was running a women's support group in Manhattan at the time. This was about 4 years ago. And I wouldn't share my story much because I just felt like it was so harrowing at times and I wanted to help other women. And, but as I was listening to other women's stories, I was becoming more empowered. I was hearing from women who were married like me, but didn't feel or didn't receive the kind of ableism that I was receiving or the recipient of. And so I was suddenly realizing, okay, there's something really off here. You know, like how come our culture is just like, I knew it was ableist, but in many ways and shapes and forms, but I was like, wait a second, I actually deserve happiness. I actually deserve love. And I've been made to feel like I don't. And I've been made to feel guilty for having a husband who cares for me and supports me through all of this. And I think at that point I realized, okay, Tina, you're going to have to do something about this. And I remember the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation asking me to be their honored hero at their Take Steps walk here in Manhattan, which is pretty large. It's about 700 people or so a year. And so I had to share my story in front of all these people. Plus they shared my story on social media. Then different publishers, different companies started coming forward asking me to talk to them more. And I was just like, wait a second, what's going on over here? And that's how I sort of stumbled upon advocacy. I was like, wait a second, there's not only do I not see other South Asians at this point talking about such a stigmatized condition or having an ostomy, but I'm also feeling like there's a need for this and that, you know, perhaps I can help to fill some of that void. And it was a very lonely place to be because during this time I was transitioning and feeling the effects, the hard effects of LogKyaKahenge from people like, what are you doing? Okay, you shared your story once. Now stop this, like go back, disappear. And that's what I was like, I would like contemplate. I would tell my husband all the time, I need to go back under the covers. He's like, nope. And he would push the publish button on my blog post. And I'd be like, ah, and freaking out. And because it's like so vulnerable to put those aspects of yourself out there. But like, had it not been for him and not been for, you know, certain nonprofit companies who really pushed me to share my story and showed me the importance and the value and how different the intersection of having, you know, an illness and a racial and ethnic background where there is ableism going on, how important it is to share that with the world because the world really has no idea about our experience. I've seen these similarities, and I think Basma had mentioned this earlier in the chat, in many Asian cultures and like in Central Asia and the Arab world, but also in the Far Eastern world. I've heard this from other patients as well, in addition to South Asia and Southeast Asia. So I really feel like this LogKyaKahenge, from what I understand, there's a Chinese Mandarin version of this sort of phrase as well. And it is sort of, I think it's stemming from, if I might share my personal experience on this, I think it's sort of stemming from the fact that there is this importance for family, culture, and elders, and less so for the self. And when you're disabled as a young person, whether that shows or manifests in the form of us needing a chair and not giving it to some auntie or uncle, and feeling guilty about that, however that manifests, it's almost coming across as a disrespect for our elders or family because we're putting our individual needs first. And that seems to be an important aspect of Asian culture, is putting the needs of our family and elders above all else. And so I've often felt like being disabled is, you have to do so much to take care of yourself. And I think that's where my advocacy has really stemmed from. It's clearing those misunderstandings that I'm not just taking care of myself to be selfish. I'm taking care of myself so that I can survive, that I survive for a living, because that's what being disabled is, to me, at least. So I think a lot of my advocacy began to really help educate South Asian people to understand that this is not something that should have a stigma, that we all deserve to have voice, and we really do need to accept people of various different conditions, because we are all diverse, from Hari to Gina to me to all of us. We're all diverse in our diseases, in our backgrounds, in our thinking, in everything. So we need to accept everyone. That's sort of what my advocacy platform is about: loving everyone and loving yourself at the same time.
Thank you so much. That was perfectly put. Hari, do you want to talk about your social media advocacy as well?
I am just going to add on to the wonderful points given by the other panelists. I think social media helps the world see the ability part of me first before they meet the disability part of me. It's like first impression at an interview, right? You want to present the best part of you first in order to get the job and accomplish what you want to get done. I also want to hearken to something Professor Mendoza-Denton said in the Stigma and Prejudice class about needing repeated exposure in order to bring out change. The exact quote goes, "It is possible to unlearn stereotypes and prejudices. What it would take is repeated and continuous exposure to exemplars of the category that will eventually replace the automaticity of connections. The point is that being at a top school like Berkeley means there are higher chances my voice will get listened to. Social media is a great tool for the repeated and continued exposure he talks about in order to bring about change."
I love that quote. That is so true. As long as we, keep having these conversations, we're going to normalize disability, which honestly should already be normal. So the last question, what do you want people to think about going forward? What do you want people to take away, most importantly, from this panel? Anyone can answer that first. Whoever wants to go first. Oh, and yeah, if anyone in the audience also wants to talk about it, totally, I'd love for this to be a group discussion as well. Yamin, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, that's me. Like basically, what I want to say about this, we don't need to advocate in South Asian community, but also we need to go advocate other community also. Like I'm being on I have not been on the South Asian part, but mostly I am in like in UK, like ostomy groups in Facebook. You can join, free to join. It's lots of support. We give lots of support to each other. What I heard, like sometimes, like um, husband leaves because of the disability. It happened to a lot of ladies in the UK, and they talk about it. But we need to like advocate. These things needs to be advocating to like our culture, especially in other cultures too, because a lot of time people don't know about the disease, and I am freely to talk about to others with others. So if they don't, whatever they think, they will be thinking. Whatever my story, I'll just tell them. And also, like I just want to tell a little bit about me. Like if you give me if you allow me.
Sure.
Okay. Actually, what happened? I was diagnosed when I was 19. So then, when I was 19 years old, I got diagnosed with. Then went to hospital. And all this thing was going on. I kept secret. So somehow my uncle came to know, and everybody came to know. They were like looked normal. So for my family, it's pretty much normal. But sometimes as you say, what LogKyaKahenge or what, you know, sometimes I feel also reluctant to people. But what I am trying to see these days, I want to talk about. Let's see who is my real friend, who is my real who's my real friend, my real my relatives to check out. So I just tell them like, this is the condition I have. If you don't like me, don't like me. I just tell them like, this is my condition. So basically, yeah. And about finding a like girl, I am divorced. So I still be like reluctant to ask a girl like if the girl's going to like me or not, because I have this ostomy. Even I'm reluctant to say Canadian to what they will think. It's not in like in our community. It goes to like other community too. So we have to be advocacy about this disease, because more the people know, the people get more educated. Like people getting educated in AIDS.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have to educate them so they will know about this.
Absolutely.
So they'll open up their mind, and when they will open up their mind, they will accept us.
I think that's a great point about going into different communities as well. And I really like the part that you said, like, if you like me, you like me, and then if you don't, you don't. Like, there doesn't need to be this kind of like covering up of your identity.
Yeah.
I want to actually I saw that Vyoma raised her hand. I'm actually going to pass it to Hari first because he has some great thoughts about inclusion that I would love for him to share. And then Vyoma, I will.
Sure. Ma, do you mind if I just answer Yaman?
Oh, yeah.
And Yaman and I have had some conversations offline too about this. I agree with you, and I think that's really what I'm trying to do is have this South Asian focus, but also have this expand so that people understand what we're going through, and people also understand how hard it is for us to speak up. So I think we definitely need a lot more of that. But I to your point, this is something that we need to continue to do. And I think it stems from our own inner self-confidence, to be able to sort of talk about our ostomy eventually, or to feel comfortable mentioning it to someone we really like. I think this is a process that takes some time for sure. And I understand your fears around it. But I don't want to take up too much time because I know we have other stuff on the agenda, Maha. So please carry forward.
Yeah. Hari, are you okay? Yeah, already got it.
I want to say this to the Indian community. Let's not just talk the talk about coming from an ancient civilization, our rich cultural and spiritual traditions, and our wonderful intellect spanning all areas from math, science, arts, and technology. Let's walk the walk too. There could be no social justice for unless you look to the needs of its most marginalized members too. Start with belonging. I want to leave you with both actionable short-term and long-term steps. South Asian clubs on campus need to start conversations like this one about how to be more inclusive of the entire community, not just those that meet an arbitrary definition of normal. These conversations need to be followed by real action. Who is being left out and how can you include them in your next event? Does the inclusion extend to belonging? Is disability being thought of as a diversity category in your conversations? With respect to a longer-term view, many of you will likely have families of your own in a decade. How can you and your kids be involved in the life of that autistic kid that lives in your street? Are they part of local South Asian cultural events? Are they just being included or are they belonging? Are their lives seen as having worth in the community? Small efforts of huge payouts? Your kids will carry these attitudes to their adulthood. A more humane society starts with you. Such actions also have a self-serving purpose. Skyrocketing rates of autism diagnosis mean a high chance of you and yours having autistic kids. Changes now will make a better world for you in future years too. I want to give you two contradicting examples to illustrate. On the one hand are the neighbors of the Gopal family in Sunnyvale who sued and harassed the family as having an autistic kid on the street was bringing down the property values. That family was ultimately forced to move. On the other hand is my personal example of the Riley family. Cindy Riley approached my mom at a park when I was a toddler and asked if she could bring her kids over so that I could get more social interaction. She was a stranger with a heart of gold with two adopted kids in addition to one son. Evan, Tyesha, and Garrett have been my friends in my community since childhood, when my own community turned their backs. I am so appreciative of this wonderful family who have helped me and my family face all the steep downs and the ups that comes with disability. I think of the Rileys as exemplifying simple living, higher thinking. The point: be like the Rileys and not the nasty neighbors of the Gopal family in Sunnyvale.
Great points. Thank you so much, Hari. Like others have said before, it's important that we normalize this, and we make it so that people want to be around like people with different abilities and everything, so that there isn't this kind of this gap between a huge part of the South Asian community. There are so many people who have different disabilities, and they're being excluded for virtually no reason. Vioma, I know you have your hand up. Do you want to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I have so many different things I want to say, but I'll try to keep it short. I briefly lived in Cupertino like Hari did, and I'm just forever impressed. It's been forever impressed upon me, like the Asian and South Asian culture and their goals for what a successful life looks like. One of those things in particular is the idea that you must be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. And I sort of, so I mean, I guess like that sort of comes from the idea that like those are like surefire paths to stability in your career and whatnot. But also I think the emphasis of doctor additionally is interesting, and I think it also speaks to the idea of the medical model that was brought up earlier, and how that has sort of played a role in how a lot of South Asian people I know see the disabled community as like a problem to be fixed, as something that science can solve because science is holy and above all. And so I think that's one really strong theme that runs in South Asian culture. I also, like, this is a completely different track, but I wanted to ask or sort of pose a question, if that's okay, Maha. I wonder, like, so I feel like culturally, my experience of South Asian community is very different in the US versus the South Asian community back in India. And I was sort of wondering if people had any insights onto those differences. Obviously, I think for my parents, at least one of them is just they have so much more exposure, or they feel that way, at least in the US, and that has affected their views. And it like, have other people noticed differences in ableism and perceptions of disability between those two subgroups? And if so, I'm curious about what they look like.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that for you, Vioma. I do speak to a lot of patients out of India. There's a massively growing population of inflammatory bowel disease in India. And even in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, they don't have access to the kinds of meds we have. There's a whole slew of issues that are different, but the overwhelming cultural sort of issues around marriage, around lack of acceptability in family, social events, food, as sort of this uniting force that's suddenly taken away from them with a diagnosis like this. These are commonalities that seem to be an issue all over the world. So I'll speak to IBD patients even in like Central Asia or the UK or in Spain. If they are of South Asian descent, they're generally facing very similar things. But it is sort of magnified in India and in some of these South Asian countries because of the gaps in care, the lack of recognition of these diagnoses. And I'm sure it's not just related to inflammatory bowel disease. I'm sure autism is much more pronounced in India, but obviously can't speak to that aspect. But they are facing constant taunting by their families, constant issues around their diet, and feeling less than. A lot of sons have to support their families, and being 20 or 25 with this diagnosis and having to support your family is not easy. Then the marriageability issue, the arranged marriage issue is a huge problem when you have a condition. I almost feel like with the love marriage, it's a little bit different, but with arranged marriage, it's like this resume of fitness, of what you've accomplished in life, but also what, that you have the fitness to bear children or the fitness to take care of your family, and to sort of take on all these roles. And that's what they're looking at. And a lot of people I speak to are rejected very often because of having a condition. And oftentimes they don't expose their condition, and that's grounds for divorce in South Asia. Many people end up divorced because of this. I hope that answers your question, Bioma.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
And you're welcome to ping me about this because I could go on and on about this.
I know I said last question last time, but actually I have one more question. And it is something that we actually added this morning because, with the election results partially finalized, I guess. Yes, we are very happy about it. I want to talk a little bit about, or ask about, like the future of, disability justice going forward under Biden's presidency. What do we need to continue advocating for, as well as the Affordable Care Act is going to the Supreme Court actually to be challenged by Republicans. So, like, what do you think that we can do to advocate for this?
Do you want me to take that, or does anybody else want to take that? Like, I'm happy to hear stories as well about people's experiences with the ACA, if anyone wants to share. Okay, I'll answer. So, I think I mentioned earlier that my father had passed away very young. When he was 39, I was 8. My mom was 27 years old with 2 children. And even though she had a degree from India, it wasn't very easy for her to get a job. So she was a housewife for 9 years. And it was very, very hard for her to get a job with insurance for us. She did whatever she could. She went back to school. During that time, my sister and I were in school, had no health insurance. I was dealing with all sorts of eye, joint, skin manifestations of what we now know to be Crohn's disease. And there was no way for me to sort of get treatment. And I was also having irritable bowel syndromes as well as GERD, so like acid reflux. The beginnings, really the beginnings of Crohn's disease. And I could not get treated proactively. And I do think that this had an effect down the line. I've had so many surgeries and stuff, and they do say that proactive disease management does improve patient outcomes. So I do feel that had I had access to something like ACA when I was a child, and my mom had access to that, been able to buy a policy off the exchange. Granted, it would not have been perfect. It's still not perfect. I acknowledge that. But I think it's very important for us to understand that people living on poverty lines, I know most South Asians in this country, not around the world, but in this country, we're the richest minority. But that was also a very stigmatized, taboo aspect of my existence, was growing up poor as a South Asian, and not having access to basic things and like healthcare. Healthcare is a human right, in my opinion. So I think that there are many others suffering around the world, around the country, of different socioeconomic levels who really need access to affordable care, and that we can't do away with this. And with somebody like Mitch McConnell, who might be leading the Senate, and with the Supreme Court justices that we now have, the recent swearing in of Amy Coney Barrett, I am really worried about this disappearing. I'm luckily on my husband's insurance right now, but anything can happen. I mean, we're paying over $2,000 a month for health insurance. That's ridiculous. Nobody should have to pay a rent for health insurance. So this is the other thing that I think we absolutely need some kind of overhaul of health insurance. I actually feel that not providing health insurance to everybody is an ableist act inherently.
Yeah, I want to emphasize a point that Hari left in the chat about how, major research hospitals that are, heralded as like very high quality hospitals don't accept programs like Medi-Cal, which is kind of self-defeating. What's, like why the point of having these affordable programs if not all the hospitals accept that? So Hari was saying ACA is only a start, so it's not the entire solution. But definitely it is very, having it itself is like a first step. So it's really important that we don't repeal it, but instead improve it, because healthcare is a human right. Yoma, do you want to, or actually, Sudhir raised his hand. Do you want to talk about?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share my story. So I was actually a grad student in the US, and so I moved here with a lot of ambitions and, the whole story. So like all South Asians moved to the US with a lot of ambitions, plans, etc. So yeah, in my second year or like third year, I started having these symptoms, and yeah, it was a long process of going through the tests and the medical system to finally get a diagnosis. And yeah, so many of the things that I heard today, they resonate with me. So I had the same experience. So my family wasn't taking it seriously, and they were like, so first of all, like I myself was, blaming myself. So I had this self-blame narrative that, okay, I wasn't careful enough, I wasn't eating right, I was like eating too much chips and salsa and all the kinds of things that you blame yourself for. And I was wishing it away. I was hoping that, okay, it will go away, but it's a chronic illness. So IBD is like a chronic thing. So, and the second issue that I faced was, yeah, my family wasn't taking it seriously. They were like not getting it. And like Tina mentioned, so diet has a big part in this illness. So you have to really watch your diet, and that was something that they were not sensitive to. So when I went home, they would cook like the usual thing, and my mom would insist that I eat what she cooks, and I'm like, okay, I can't eat this because it's going to give me a hard time. So yeah, but that was hard, and I've had it for like 7 years, so it's cut short my plans. So I wanted like to have a career in academia, etc. So I've kind of changed my plans. So my life has changed quite a bit, but it has also done me a lot of good, I think. So I've become a much more calmer person. So I don't really care about whatever like worldly achievements or stuff like that. So I just I have other interests. So like I pursue music, I have a job, and I'm trying to survive. So I'm fine, I think, at least for the time being. But I do have a lot of anxiety sometimes that, okay, maybe this is going to get serious, and who will be with me when it gets serious. And yeah, so the thing with my mom is she obviously loves me a lot and I love her a lot, but she just doesn't get it. So because it's something which is not yeah, like all of you pointed out, it's like a cultural issue. So the culture trains them to think in that way. So yeah, so my mom still does say a few things which I find hurtful. So she is like, when will you have kids, blah blah, and I'm like, okay, just leave me alone. So I don't want to have those discussions. So yeah, so those things are there, but yeah, it's been a big learning process for me. And yeah, so generally I've not really spoken about my illness with anyone. So I think I'm still like, a bit like, I'm carrying that stigma within myself maybe. So I don't really speak about it. And this is the first time I'm actually participating in an event like this. And Tina got in touch with me and she invited me to this. And I thought, okay, and it's really been an eye opener, because hearing all of your stories is actually, it's very empowering. And I feel like, okay, I mean, there are a lot more people like me, so I don't have to worry about, you know, being the only weirdo. So yeah, so I don't know, yeah. So yeah, it's been like it's been a crazy last ever since I had this diagnosis, because of the uncertainty and then the anxiety. And yeah, so I've had to like, so yeah, the one good thing that has happened to me is I've started therapy because of this, and that brought to light many other issues. And I would seriously, encourage anyone with, a chronic health issue uh, to seek help with, therapy. So that's the thing that I've realized. And yeah, that's it. The main thing that irks me is the food. Like, whenever I am with these Indians, they are like, okay, insisting that you eat the same food and blah blah. So it's, yeah, and also, yeah, with IBD you have to. So I've kind of gone on these experimental diets. So like, the paleo diet, etc. So they are often like, you have to eat meat, which is something which is, I don't know. It's there are like all these religious beliefs attached with diet, and that's something which irks me a lot, because if someone has health issues and they have to eat something in order to recover, why would you not let them do that? Like, why would you still, impose your cultural and religious beliefs on people and make them miserable? So that irks me a lot. So yeah, so that's it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for sharing, especially highlighting the mental health aspect of it. A lot of people in the chat were talking about how great therapy has been. And I think it's important that, like, as you know, as the whole like world starts talking more about mental health, it's important to highlight that disabled people do struggle with mental health in a different way and sometimes more amplified way. So yeah, therapy is great. I mean, I recommend everyone just try it at least once. Doesn't work for everybody, but it can definitely be a useful tool.
Um,
Um,
can I
yeah,
say something?
yes, definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, like I actually, what happens is like I always help my mom with the cooking and everything.
Mhm.
And my mom tells me like, you help me with all the works and stuff. So if I'm not there, who's gonna help you? I said, you don't have to worry, mom. I will find somebody. And yes, to be honest, I've been like since 2016 or before that, I had been going through depression just because the Kya Kahenge, like if I'm going to find a girl, if I'm going to find the right girl. Even one time, I was talking to my mom. I said, "Mom, that's it. I'm done. I'm gonna go suicide. So I'm done. I'm gonna do suicide." My mom said, "Yamin, you are beautiful. You're gonna leave. You're gonna leave. Okay? You're not doing this." That's what my mom said. Then I said, "Okay, forget it. I'm not doing it." I took some classes. Then over the pandemic, since I have all this like sometimes depression, I'm like doing like learning how to paint, to keep myself busy.
Yeah.
Learning how to cook and all this kind of thing. So basically, yeah.
I think that's something that Sudhir mentioned, about how, you know, having a disability sometimes also kind of changes your perspective about what matters and what doesn't. So, you know, like painting and cooking, that's awesome. Those are all like great hobbies to have. We don't need to be hustling all the time. That's another thing in South Asian community, hustle culture. It's like you need to be the CEO of Google by when you turn 15. No, you don't need to do that. You can relax some days. You can do nothing some days, and that's totally okay. And I feel like if we keep normalizing that, life will improve not just for disabled people, but for all people. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Oh, sorry.
Ma, I think I just wanted to add to what you just said. I think one of the things that I know we're probably closing up soon, but I just wanted to say one last thing because I know I'm a little bit older, but I am in grad school and I'm now pursuing grad school again after having to drop out of Wall Street and an MBA program in my 20s. So I lost my 20s to inflammatory bowel disease. And one of the things that I think I gained in terms of perspective was that life really isn't a rat race. And I want to emphasize that today. Being of South Asian descent, you know, we are told, just like you were saying, Ma, it's all about getting the best job, the best grades, the best husband or wife, having kids, having 2.4 kids by age 30. Like it's just like it's like there's this formula developed for us from the very beginning, and it's actually not that way. I've been there, I've come out on the other side, and hopefully will stay on this side. But I have to say, I'm pursuing graduate school in my 30s, and it's okay. It doesn't matter when you do this, how you do this at the pace that you need to. I take semesters off, or I go and take one class at a time if that's what I can handle in that given moment. So, you know, being people with disabilities or being differently abled, however we want to term this, don't, you know, feel discouraged that I'm not married by this age, or I haven't completed my degree by this age, or that I don't have children by this age. Yes, there's a lot of FOMO, especially looking at, you know, other Asians online and seeing everybody living their lives, or somebody traveling to Greece and we can't do that. But I believe me, I've been there. It's really painful. It's really hard. But I do believe that, you know, we can set these, you know, small goals for ourselves and eventually achieve them. I have traveled. I've traveled to Italy. I've traveled to Spain. I've traveled all over Europe. And I think we have to set those goals, start slowly, and create those goals for ourselves. We can't live on anybody else's timeline and under anybody else's schedule. And I think, you know, that's just something I wanted to impart on, you know, some of the college students here is don't pressure yourself to fit someone else's timeline.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think Brian wanted to add something really quick before I end the.
Oh, thanks. So yeah, just like one more thing on the food aspect and like eating aspect. Yeah, like I kind of like put it in the chat already, but yeah, like how I think Sudhir brought up about like having to like just like the food aspect in general, because like I'm vegan, and then like when my mom always suspects I might have some health issues from like being vegan, and like got me to do a blood test, and then my TSH levels are high. But like I have a lot of autistic friends who like also have like TSH levels like out of the normal, and so like regardless like of the food issue, it's like disabled people are like our nutritional aspects are not like centered, and like even like in veganism, like people there's this like sort of like purity narrative, and like you have to like eat like a certain like kind of vegan food, and no, it's like there are like people who like there are people who like need like like different nutrition, and like veganism should accommodate that. And that said, though, like animal liberation and disability justice are like really tied. And Sonara Taylor has written a book on this, Beasts of Burden, Animal and Disability Liberation. And so like both, like when our movements are conscious of each other, then we can progress for both, like for all disabled animals, and many animals exploited in the factory farming industry are disabled as well.
Thank you for adding that, Brian. Really something that I don't think I've heard before, but I'll definitely check it out. If you could drop the name of the author in the chat. Anyways, I think I am going to end this meeting now. But oh yeah,
just a minute, because Maha, what I want to say, like, do you guys have a South Asian chronic Crohn's disease like a group in Facebook?
I was gonna ask Tina, do you know anything about that? Because I don't really use Facebook much, but
I think Gina, I think you've started a chronically brown group, right? Is she still on?
Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. I got really quiet because you were talking about American stuff, so I wasn't really sure what you were talking about. But yeah, no, it's not really. Oh wait, I do have a Facebook group, but it's more of any chronic illness and disability. Where I think, are you looking for Crohn's disease specifically?
Like anything, like Crohn's disease or like anything, so we can get together and share ideas, you know. For example, if you have arthritis problem, so arthritis can come. If we have a problem, they can post like I'm going through this problem, you might have gone through this problem. So you tell him or that, give him idea. So I'm also in a chronic Crohn's disease in not in Asian, not like South Asian.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In like basic, even Canada, I don't see anybody has it, but most of the groups that I'm in, all are in UK.
Yeah.
Yaman, there is an Indian IBD support group on Facebook. That's just IBD specific though. It's out of India. I can send you information for that. And then let me just think what else. I mean, there's other ones too. There's an Indian ankylosing spondylitis group, again, out of India, but there are NRIs who join. And there are, like, from what I understand, there are people from Bangladesh and from Pakistan who join. I believe there is a Pakistan IBD group as well on Facebook. You might have to do a little bit of digging, but message me and I'll send you some links, because there are definitely groups.
The reason I'm saying that if we don't have it, then we have to create we need to do more advocacy about this. As I say, if we don't do advocacy, people will not learn, not even our community, to advocate to other community.
Absolutely.
Even Canadian community, even American community, even any community doesn't know much about it, because there's not much people, like only 1 million people are suffering from this. It's like suffering from this like in North America, but not whole lot in like Asia. So basically we need to, like, you know, advocate this kind of thing, so then people will know more about it, educated, so they will be able to accept us like they're accepting autistic people, somebody with HIV, cancer, any cancer, like, you know. So we need to advocate people. I just want to say.
I think it's a good point. Also, like I was just thinking about, like, I would definitely recommend. I can put everyone's social media handles in here, but that's part of what Sukhjin and Tina and Hari are doing, are trying to do that, like the advocacy and reaching out to different communities. Especially Sukhjin highlights a lot of different people from around the diaspora, which is really cool. And I think, yeah, if there's like a space for South Asians with various different conditions to get together, that'd be definitely really cool. But yeah, definitely do some research into that, and we can all work on that if you guys want to connect, I see some people are dropping their Facebooks in the chat. If you are like, so I don't know how many people came through the Facebook event or through like the link itself, but I can try and connect through Facebook. But again, I don't know how many people came through that avenue, so I don't know how much I can do on that end. But definitely like drop your Facebooks in the chat if you want to connect with people who attended this event. I'll put mine too. Oh yes, we'll send out a follow-up email too with everyone's with some resources and the social medias of our panelists. That being said, thank you so much everyone for coming out. I'm very so grateful for our panelists and for the community for showing up for something that is really important. So I'm going to end the meeting. Have a great rest of your weekend. Yeah.